What's your favorite thing? It's always the thing you got last, because there's that moment in time which it looks like it's the most marvelous thing on earth, and you simply have to acquire it. You have to bring it into the fold. And so that's the thing. And you know, when you get something new, it's quite true. I mean, it sounds preposterous, but it's true. It literally glows. Enter the room, and that object will be shining like a beacon. You'll see it will light up. That new thing is glowing, and then slowly over time, it kind of fades. And if something else comes along, that's like click. It sounds incredibly fickle, doesn't it? It really probably is. But new things do have an iridescence about them, and you can't miss them. Discovering this stuff was really like an act of creativity, especially when it all began, because it was not any of it considered of any worthwhile value in any sense of the word. And to look at something and say, my God, this thing is art. And not only that, but it needs me to rescue it, because if I don't, it's going to be thrown away. That's like creating at that moment. You've taken an ordinary object and said, this is a piece of really great artwork, and you acknowledge that by paying for it.
I imagine you never bought anything from an artist, right? These things were long ago produced and then gifted.
Well, I do have some artwork here that I've negotiated with living artists, and they usually are friends of mine. And they're usually trades, or the friendship is so strong. In the case of the carvings from Charles Ponstingl, the friendship is so strong that the money is immaterial. These are all the work of my dear friend Charles Ponstingl, who is in Allentown, PA, and was for most of his life an electrician. And when he was about 43 in 1973, he picked up a penknife to see if he could carve something. And because he grew up loving comic books, he decided he'd carve comic characters, and he started making these.
He started when he was 43?
Yep, he started when he was 43, and the first one, which you'll probably focus on eventually, little tiny sorcerer's apprentice down there in the bottom corner. And through a series of circumstances, fate brought us together, and it was a very roundabout way, which you'll read all about on my website. And it got to the point where every year he would come here with his family and bring me the carvings he did that year. And I became kind of like, in a very casual way, a kind of patron.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what he did. These are the early pieces. The most extraordinary ones are going to be found upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
But not that these aren't extraordinary, but he just got better and better and better. And the guy is absolutely, simply a genius. And he's the last person that would realize it, or even realize how really great these are. Very, very humble man. He loved the comics. He loved the people who created these images in the first place. This is his way of paying homage to them. And they're all carved from wood. Every single thing here, there's nothing that isn't wood. There's nothing he can't do with a piece of wood. And he starts with a single figure. He explained to me on this one, he started with just this little tiny bird, and he built the rest of it. He'd rather have seen that isn't ready-made, but something he has to put together himself. And when I first met him, he was using the most diverse and inadequate of sources. And while I never told him what to do or even suggested too much what to do, I have to say that, every year he would send me a Christmas present, a carving, and we would send him books, because I had nothing equal to offer him. But I made sure the books had a lot of images in it that I hoped that he would carve, and eventually he did. He did carve a lot of those.
Did you have more of his pieces than anyone else?
Oh, absolutely.
And so in that way you kept him alive as an artist.
He was inspired because he had, artists really are working for an imagined audience. That person out there who understands what they're doing. And many artists go all their lives and they never find that person in the reality, in a living entity. It's always that imagined audience. Charles found an audience who thought so much more highly of what he was doing than he did himself. And so it was a perfect getting together. It was a perfect meeting. So I absolutely loved what he was doing, and he just loved doing it, but he had never had the slightest desire to own it. No need to own it. He didn't care what happened to it. He referred to it as kindling. He just loved doing it, and he sits in his basement carving and carving and carving and carving. And he's carving probably at this very moment as we sit here. And he insists that he's working on a mega project that he's giving me as a gift. It's a heavy responsibility on my part to be worthy of it. And then I have other artwork from other artists that I've known. John Fawcett here, who did these paintings on the wall. He's an incredible artist, in my opinion. Of course, he used the Disney imagery, and I love the imagery, and I'm not sure if I like the imagery better than the work. But it doesn't matter because I love what he does. My parents spent a lot of money on sending me to a lot of art schools, and the end result of that is all around us. I'm not talking about the choosing this and the putting together and the displaying it or anything. I'm talking about all the endless restorations I have done. And if anything I've done is visible, it's wrong. It was a disaster. So my artwork is everywhere here, but you can't see it. And when it's successful, it's invisible. Because these things all need help, and I help them. And that's a big no-no in the field of collecting. But I have to say, my friend Noel Barrett, who you may not know if you ever watched the Antique Roadshow, he was like my traveling companion. We were like Laurel and Hardy for like 30 years, hanging out at every antique show, everywhere, sharing hotel rooms. He said, I always advise any collector, don't restore it, don't retouch it, don't repaint it. Don't do any of those things unless you're Mel Birnkrant. And I guess that, coming from him, that really says it all. I can do these things, I can restore them. In fact, sometimes all I have to do is touch them. It's just crazy, the relationship I have with these objects. I can be at a antique show and I'll pick something up and the dealer is trying to figure out how bad to screw me for it. And as I handle it, it starts to look better and better and better. And I realize he sees it too. And the price is getting higher and higher. And I'm really messing myself up. I've learned to just put it down, leave it alone. If it's a posable doll or something, my compulsion is to pose it until it looks just so fetching that it costs myself money.
Whereas if you didn't touch it,
if I didn't touch it, it's lying there.
When you touch it, it
Yes.
already responds.
You
to
know,
the
it's sitting there like
restoration.
that, and I'm like going, hi,
Yeah.
it's like, so, but it happens. Just by owning it, just by touching it, just by handling it, just by placing it, it starts to look better. But when something needs your help and it needs your restoration, well, the process of doing that, you're really understanding that object. You're going through the process the man who created it went through. And you're appreciating it in a way that just finding it perfect will never allow you to do. And so I have a conversation with these objects, and they tell me what they want me to do. And it's not verbal, but it's real. And some objects don't want you to do anything. Some are proud to show the signs of age. Some are showing the signs of abuse. and they'd like to have that erased. So I talk to it, and it tells me what to do. And this is a little scary in some respects, because I've discovered things that had parts missing. And these were not objects that had been seen before, because the best things you could find are the things that you're finding for the first time, that you've never seen before, nor has anybody. And there's something missing. And I'll put that thing on my desk, and I'll look at it, and I'll look at it, and eventually it will tell me, this is true, it'll tell me what the missing pieces should look like. And I've done that a number of times. Sometimes it's taken weeks to do. And then years later, one will turn up complete. And by God, I nailed it. You can't tell the difference from the complete one, from the one that it and I together completed.
Well, that gets at the issue of animate versus inanimate objects and
Yep.
our relationship with them,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And these figures are of creatures alive, that we
Mhm.
imagine alive,
Mm-hmm.
in a moment of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and art's about creating and creating something
Yes.
animate. So tell me about that. I mean, do you feel them alive?
Oh,
here?
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Oh, positively. You've explained it just about as well as I ever could. So I'll simply reiterate what you've just said. If you take a log, you'll throw it on the fire. If that log is fashioned into the image of a doll or a baby or some creature, you aren't going to throw it on the fire. You have a respect for it. If you can do that, you're really very cold or have a very cold heart, because you can't do it. You can't do it. Once that thing has got that human image to it or that animal image or whatever, it takes on a certain form of life. I'm not going to say it's a live, but it's a form of life. It's something that no longer makes it a simple inanimate object. And some objects are simply endowed with a lot more life than others.
Oh, I'm shadowing your face. I'm sorry.
Even her boobs move.
That's good.
They're on springs.
Yeah.
This is no ordinary puppet. Every string was designed to do something erotic. She wasn't made to do ordinary things.
Right.
Her leg is as screwed up as
Couldn't
mine
grasp
is.
it until years later how somebody could idolize an inanimate object. And now it's all about, my whole life is about that. But I found out that tapping into what I knew how to do was about the only way I was going to get a job that would pay me $100 a week, which is what my job was paying me. And so I did, and I spent the rest of my life making a living. And the artwork was totally secondary.
But you made your living in the art world,
Oh, in not the art world, the toy world.
in the toy world.
The toy
Now,
world.
why is the toy world not the art world?
Well, there's art in the toy world, and my whole life is an effort to prove that in a sense. As a toy inventor, and I worked for 20 years with color forms. My wife does not like the idea to say I worked for color forms. I worked with color forms. She doesn't like it to be thought that I had a job. Technically, I didn't have a job. I worked entirely for royalties, and it depended on my so-called contributions, had to add up, and that was what was the income. Now I come in there with ideas that weren't that great, but looked great, which made it really difficult because my art training abilities, whatever you want to call them, confounded the issue rather than clarified it. So companies would, instead of looking at it and saying, we don't want this piece of crap, they would look at it and say, this is really interesting, let's test it, let's bring it back. So they would bring it back to the company, they'd show it to their art department, they'd educate their art department, then they'd test it or something, and they'd find out the idea sucked, and they'd give it back to you. But because it looked so good, it was using up time like you wouldn't believe. Eventually, it got to the point where people were buying my items because they looked good. And then when they tried to replicate them, what they replicated looked bad. And they said, this isn't any good anymore. We're giving it back to you unless Birnkrant does it. That's how I ended up sculpting dolls and doing all that stuff, because the people they hired to do it couldn't do it, so they had to get me to do it, and I ended up having to do that. But the fact that what I did looked good was incidental. Now, it was all made for one purpose, to sell an idea, to sell a concept. If the company bought your idea, it became top secret. So all of your artwork would never be seen again. It was brought into the inner sanctum, and that was the secret that they were holding as they produced this item. If it didn't sell, it came back to me, and nobody saw it.
Collect them all. Spider Biter, the Critter Spitter, the Hungry Hatchling, Cyclops, and Chowhound. Plus there's Wagon Dragon, C. Creepio, Crazy Climber, and the Bobbin Bat. These are the creatures of the gory laboratory. Science experiments that got totally messed up. When night comes and the lab is empty, these gnarly creatures rule.
So what you're seeing on that website is all this artwork that was generated for no good purpose whatsoever. And here I am living with a lifetime's worth of it that never saw the light of day. And on the website, I'm giving it its moment in the cyber universe, that until somebody doesn't pay the bill on the website, it will exist in a digital sense at least. And that's what it's all about. In the days when I was getting paid for it, in the days when we sat up in a loft on 26th Street and made stuff by hand, those were the best days. They really were. We were working with our hands, and we were selling what we made, and we were getting paid for it, and that was really good. When I went into toy inventing, especially where you make all kinds of shit and nothing happens with it, and then something that took you half an hour starts bringing in money, it's almost like getting an allowance. It's not like you're really earning it. None of it makes sense. The only thing that made sense for me was this total drive to get enough money to keep being able to find these toys. That's all I cared about, just to be able to not ever see something that I wanted that I couldn't afford.
So your art creation, the art creation that you were paid for versus this, was a means to an end?
Yeah. And the end was the money had to come, because I had a family and I had a house and of sorts and this and that and the other thing. But the thing that drove me on was I just wanted to be able to afford these toys. And boy, did fate play a dirty trick on me. Because I found this thing to love, this thing to collect, and it was worthless. And so I was loving it. I was saving it from oblivion. And then came the dealers and the entrepreneurs who saw that there were people like me who were hooked on it, and some of them were really basket cases. Some of them were addicted, you know. I've never crossed that line, and not in my opinion. And I've never paid a price that was crossed the threshold of pain, because there's a level of craziness I've never approached, because to me it's got to be enjoyable. The minute it becomes painful, that's it.
But you produced prolifically.
Well, yeah.
And you collected prolifically.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I guess because you're saying that it was a means to an end, you had to produce prolifically to support the family, obviously, too,
Well-
and have your life, but then also make your collection.
Well, see, I was, first of all, I never opted for the sure thing. I always preferred the gamble. And so what I produced was always a gamble. It was always an attempt to win the lottery, and I was making my own lottery tickets. And when everyone's another chance, you can never get enough. And a lot of them didn't win the lottery. Let me put it this way: you scratched them, and nothing was underneath. Others were amazingly successful, but were killed by fate. I have had so many no cigars closes in my life. It's ridiculous. And so there was a disconnect. It was like an adventure coming up with what can you think of next, what can you think of next, what can you think of next. And here I am stuck with all this stuff. And that wasn't what it was about. It was the getting of it that was what it was about.
Did you ever imagine as you were collecting it? Did
No.
you ever? It was all.
No.
So it was the act of collecting.
It was the
and-
act of collecting. The rest of it is entirely secondary. I never thought, oh, I have an empty space, like I had an empty space in the showcase. I never thought, oh, I got to fill this space. I never thought, oh, I got to complete this. I never thought those things. I thought, I'm heading out onto a great adventure, and I'm going to find treasure. And I went to places where there was treasure. So you say, did I get things all at once or individually? Well, there were places where you could get things individually all at once. So you could go to Atlantic City and find 20 fabulous things. And it was always like Christmas, because you knew Santa was going to show up at Atlantic City. And it was fabulous. The Brimfield 3 times a year. My God, it was like going to the land of Oz.
So as you were collecting it, you didn't think, how am I going to arrange it?
No.
Where will it fit in with
No,
what I already
never,
have?
never. This arrangement, it's for the stuff. It's for its own benefit. It's to protect it. It's not for people to come in and see it. People don't come in and see it. In fact, I didn't let anyone in here for years. Certainly, now, ordinary people, yes. Artists, yes. Collectors, not really. They had to be trusted friends. Dealers, never.
I imagine, though, it would be inevitable if you did let people in, because people would look at it and say, oh my God, and want it too, like you wanted it, right?
Kelly, such people, they maybe in your world they exist, but I think to a certain degree they think, oh my God, why bother? I mean, I can't get there, forget it, but it's like, no, but to answer your question, seriously,
Yeah.
it wasn't about the owning it, and it wasn't about the
Yeah,
displaying it.
yeah.
It was about the discovering it. And I never tire. I'll put it another way, and this is an analogy I've used time and time again, but it's true. Some people are gourmets. They travel the world looking for exotic dining experiences. And when they've led a lifetime of all of these wonderful meals, it all ended up down the toilet. My adventures as a gourmet seeking experiences all ended up on the shelf. By saying that there's a distinct distance between myself and the stuff that I create. If I feel it's my work, I'm uncomfortable with it. I have to feel that there's more to it than that. That I like to feel like I'm a radio, and this stuff has a veracity, and that it exists someplace, somewhere, and that I'm picking up, just like when I'm restoring a toy and it's talking to me about what to do. When I'm working on a project, a doll or something, I'll pick up the piece of clay and I'll let it tell me what to do. And it's happened time and time again. And I love those moments. It happens. One of the first times was something called oodles. And little tiny babies, it was a bad idea, but there were a lot of them. And this company said they wanted to do it, and they wanted to have like 68 of them or something like this. So I made a little mold for a face and a body and body parts, and then I just pumped them out, lined them all up on the table, and I started picking them up and putting them together. And they told me what to do. Damn it. It was amazing. I just let it talk to me, and the babies told me what to do. And when it was right, I knew, and I stopped. And so they were doing different stuff, and I never said to myself, I'm going to make one doing this. I let it do it. It's really strange, but it's true. And I feel like unless somebody somewhere is telling me what to do, I don't feel comfortable with it. If I'm doing it myself, and I can do it myself, it's like you and your job, doing it for money, doing it yourself, faking it. It's like faking it. I won't get into any more detail, but it's like faking it. It's not for real. If I think I'm doing it, it's not for real. It's got to be coming from someplace. You see, everything's about levels. Everything is like, there's levels of logic, and then there's the world of make-believe. And you just don't know if that's just pure bullshit or not. But it's so much fun to believe in it that why not? Where's the rule that says you can't believe in anything you want to believe or anything can be possible? And if I want to believe these things are real, let me believe they're real. And I treat them as though they are, and I take care of them as though they are. And of course, the greatest miracles of any of this is this stuff that is so peripheral that it's a miracle. It lasted a day, let alone 100 years. Things that were designed for a kid to cut out and play with and dump the next day are still here. Things made of paper or crepe paper or little trifles that are so fragile. I mean, I was thinking the other day, or just doing it for the website, little jack-o'-lanterns with eyes printed on tissue paper, 100 years old. And there they are, looking like the very day that they were made. It's like a time machine.
I know. I was reading that. I found that fascinating, that the celluloid toys that came out over the span of time were the first toys like that weren't metal, that kids, or wood, that kids could play with. And the fragility of those toys.
And you know,
Right?
I'm just trying to write about them now because I'm working on that page for my new website thing. Mm-hmm. And one match, and
Yeah.
that whole showcase would be gone. I mean, like that, and a great poof, it would be gone. And yet, celluloid was the material on which the cells were painted for animated cartoons. And if it wasn't for celluloid, there would be no Mickey Mouse. Well, that's replaced now by acetate. And film in general is acetate. And film in general and animation is gone too. That's over. There'll be no more film. There'll soon be no more tape. It'll all be digital. The one thing that they couldn't replicate were these celluloid toys.
They have an airiness, a lightness.
They are light as a feather.
And you can see
Yes.
it. I mean, even when you're not picking them up, you can see that they are that. And you don't see that in plastic. You
Well,
don't
look at
see that in...
My favorite over there, the Mickey Mouse skating. Mm-hmm. There's this massive figure. It's over there in that shelf over there.
Yeah.
There's this massive figure that's held aloft by one single roller skate, the weight of a wind-up motor. And because this thing is so light, it's like a fragile gossamer butterfly wing. It's held aloft by this tiny little motor. You couldn't do that today. I don't care all the technology in the world, they couldn't replicate that toy today. So many of these treasures are not only lost, but they could never be recreated.
How did you, each one of these cases, with the backgrounds and the way you chose your pieces, to put them into each collection, I mean, that is art. The way that you did the colors, the textures. How did you do that? What did that look like?
Well, that's just intuition. That's, again, letting them just tell me what to do. I didn't have to do any thinking. I just sort of knew what to do.
but you made this collection over decades.
Yeah,
so,
it
so,
grew.
so when you decided to put, right, several
Yeah.
pieces together, and you say these
Yeah.
belong together,
Yeah.
did you remember then, oh, well, I have that piece that's in that box right now that I got
Sure.
2 years ago, and that piece I
Sure.
got 5 years ago, and those two pieces are going to come out and be together?
Yeah, I'm reliving that now, doing that website, actually. Look, what you're looking at is, it's a rare occasion that you can actually look in somebody's head and see what's up there. And this is it, folks. This is what's up there. I mean, look around. You're inside my head. This is it. I've cataloged it all. I know where everything is and what it is and all about it. And God forbid I open a drawer and see something I forgot I owned, and I like go into, what? Did I actually own this, or did somebody put it there when I wasn't around and looking?
So in all this time, you were able to remember. If I went and asked you about a particular piece, you would know it?
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. Well, you know, it's a curious thing. There was a time when the guy who did the toys department at Sotheby's knew me really well. And he would call and use me as their source for when they would get an object that was like this. And he'd say, I've got this Mickey Mouse, Mel, and can you tell me anything about it? I'd say, well, what do the eyes look like? What does this look like? You know, he'd be holding it in his hand, and I'd be telling him what it was and describing it to him, and he couldn't believe it. He said, it's like you can see it. I said, well, I can see it. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I not only knew every piece in my collection, it was a time I knew every piece in everybody's collection. I mean, there was a time like that when I had it all up there in my head. But yeah, I know all this stuff, but that's all I know.
So at,
Yeah.
at any point during the years of collecting, well, first of all, have you stopped?
Yes,
You have.
I have in a sense. Well,
What-
first of all, as you can see, I'm out of space. As you may or may not easily perceive, I'm running out of energy. And what you may not know, I'm pretty much out of money. So that, and on top of that, the stuff that I haven't seen, and excites me, is running out too. So it was it's a pretty good piece of perfect timing. Everything kind of all ran out together. And now I'm happily just sitting there at the computer, in a way reliving a lifetime, re-enjoying the good parts, probably more than I did the first time around. Now, Eunice, on the other hand, always let me indulge my collection. And she said things to me that any collector that I knew would give an appendage to have said to them. And that's, you earn the money, you deserve to spend it any way you want to. I mean, those words are gold, and she let me do that. And she's done without a lot of things. Well, I got toys. She's really been great in that respect. She was behind me with the collecting all the way, and she's enjoyed it because it's brought people into our life that she could have something that she could get people here socially that she wouldn't have known otherwise. And there's no doubt that this collection and that my interest in Mickey Mouse has brought me into contact with many really, really interesting people. One of the crazy things of my entire life was this need to hang on to it. You know, artists have to be willing to do it and let go of it. I never lifted a finger unless I wanted the thing I was making. See, that's the crazy thing, and I think about it a lot these days because I know people like Charles who just love the doing of it, and they do it and do it and do it, and they don't have to own it. I think of my friend John Fawcett, who has to do art every single day. He just pumps it out. I never had to do that. I never did a damn thing unless I wanted the thing I was making. If I wanted the thing, I would make it. Well, what now? In the best of all possible worlds, I would just love to see it kept intact. That's all there is to it. Basically, two things are going to happen. One, I'll die, and then my daughter will have a garage sale. My wife, there's people that could help her sell it. And so she'll probably get some, God knows, dumb auction company to come in here and who hasn't got a clue what it's all about, have the world's biggest sale. And because there's not enough people who want it these days, and it will all go for nothing. As a totality, now I'm going to be faced with having to sell some of this pretty soon. And it's going to be really painful for several reasons. One being I spent my lifetime knitting this sweater, and I hate to be the one that has to pick it apart. Secondly, don't cry. Secondly, it's like a hand. Shall I lop off the little finger first? The hand is seriously damaged. In this day that we live in, the little finger, the next few fingers have become worthless. The only thing that's viable, still worth money, the thumb. So what do? Cut off the thumb? That's the situation I'm in right now. Sure, I'd like to see somebody take this and perpetrate it and just keep it as whole, because yes, it is a totality. It is one great big total entity. And that it grew that way, it developed that way. It wasn't a group of things, it was a totality of things. And to what degree I've been able to control the environment, they lived together happily, everybody looking for the place where it belonged. And it would be a wonderful thing if somebody would save this thing, and I'd be alive to help them remount it properly. These things belong together. They're a slice of history, there's a slice of Americana, there's a gathering of things that could never be replicated or brought together again. The minute they're broken up, they can never be brought together again. There are just too many things that are one of a kind. Moments in time, the energy I put into them, nobody else has got that crazy energy. You have to be there to get them. Money can't buy them. You need a time machine. As I said in my little introduction to the website, you need to have been at every major, to replicate this, you need to be at every major toy show and flea market on the East Coast for the last 50 years, and you have to be able to run faster than me. So that's step one, just keep it together, make an archive, preserve it. Do I want to see somebody reproduce what's here? Well, it couldn't be done, but if somebody wanted to mount it anew and I'm still alive to help them, I'd be glad to do that. It's a little bit what that website is about, to make a photo record of what was here. So if somebody ever, by some miracle, before or after I'm dead, came along, they would know how it was put together. But probably all that website will be is just a thing. It will be the last remaining record of it, a moment in time that I maybe mistakenly kept private.
Getting a glimpse inside the head and home of Mel Birnkrant was an experience that very few others have ever had. This film only captures a fraction of his complete, wonderful collection, which is painstakingly documented on his website. The future of this vast and unbelievable collection is unknown.
Although maybe someday aliens from outer space will come with some great pump and empty the space out.